More than 9 out of 10 companies that trialled a 4-day work week are so impressed with the results, they plan to adopt it in the longer term. That's the conclusion of a 6-month study in the UK involving 61 companies. The ambition of campaigners for a 4-day week is for staff to receive 100% of the pay for 80% of the time while delivering the same output as before. And to be clear, not everyone involved in this study is adopting it permanently, at least not yet. But 18 of the 61 companies said they would keep the 4-day week on a permanent basis because of observable benefits. Meanwhile, a further 38 said they were going to continue with the trial. How did the workers themselves feel about the shift? One office worker had this to say to Sky News about the pilot.
Weekends can be quite hectic, the 2-day weekend, so it's been quite nice to have that extra day. You see your friends and family on the 2 days when they're also free, and then you get that extra day off during the week just to do all your chores or just to have that time to yourself to relax. So it's really made a big difference to my mental health.
We just heard there about improved mental health is backed up by data from the study. 39% of those participating said they were less stressed working 4 days rather than 5. Other stats that stand out from the study include how the number of sick days dropped by around 2/3, while there was a 57% fall in the number of people leaving the companies. The results even found, and I found this astonishing, that company revenue actually went up during the trial. They increased slightly by 1.4% over the trial period and by 35% when compared to the same 6-month period in 2021. Earlier today, I spoke to Jack Kellum from the think tank Autonomy, one of the groups who organised the pilot. I began by asking what people found they valued most about having an extra free day.
People found their sleep was better with this extra day off. I think that's a really big thing for people. I think that has a real knock-on effect to fatigue that people feel and rest of working week, right, by losing out on sleep. So sleep was improved. In terms of balancing sort of caring responsibilities, we often see, particularly a lot of interviews that were done in the study with workers, and I think what comes up, particularly with parents, is that extra time, whether that's just to do their errands with kids, right, running them to school, or to spend more time with them at the end of the day. I think reduced working hours makes a massive difference to people's mental health in that respect as well. So those are two of the really big, I think, findings that we've seen here. But often, the amazing thing about short working hours is it can mean something different to everyone, right? It's freedom to do as you wish in that extra time. There are common themes that come up, like I've said. So for instance, with parents, but people find different options, right? Whether that's taking up hobbies, whether that's just getting like the life admin that gets in the way through the week out of the way on your extra day off. People are able to put it to work as they like.
Staff retention is hugely important for businesses, and there was one statistic which said that the number of people leaving these companies fell by 57% during the period of the trial. How important was that as a finding in the study?
Yeah, so I think this has been a big shift that we've seen in some of the companies that we've worked with, shifting to a 4-day working week over recent years. So I was obviously the draw of productivity and improved worker well-being has been long-standing. I think, particularly in the last 12 months, keeping hold of workers and being more attractive to new workers as well has become one of the top reasons that people are shifting to a shorter working week. And I think sort of going forward, that's going to be one of the real attractions to shorter working hours.
And are there any sort of big companies now that you're talking to on the back of this study who might want to adopt it or do trials of their own? Because it's important to say 18 of the 61 companies involved are going to permanently adopt this. 38 are now continuing with the trial, more or less. So is that going to be part of a bigger study with even more businesses coming in? Is this just the beginning of widespread interest from the business sector about a 4-day week?
I mean, without going into details, we've definitely had interest from some really big companies around Europe and worldwide in recent months in terms of this transition to shorter working hours. I think this is going to be an increasing trend. It's not going to go away. I think that raises a really important point now for trade unions and other progressive politicians to really sort of get behind and help to shape shorter working hours. This isn't a flash in the pan now. It's been we've seen a growing number of companies make this shift. So it's really important to make sure that this continues to work in the interests of all, right? So it'd be great to see increasing uptake now as more and more companies are getting on board with this, to see trade unions, politicians helping to shape this to make sure that the 4-day working week does work out for everyone.
And are there any sectors where this might not work? That really interests me, because people obviously look at big companies like Google or Microsoft or organizations in the public sector, the civil service, and they might say 4-day weeks, that works. Are there any sectors where that's just simply not the case, where it's just dysfunctional?
So there are sectors where it certainly requires a different strategy to move to a shorter working week. So whereas many of the companies who were involved in this trial were able to move to shorter working hours for no loss in pay without having to hire additional workers, yeah, if you're looking at other sectors which are more sort of human labour intensive, right? So whether that's within care, whether that's within health, education, for instance, in a sense, it's harder, right? But it's just a question of numbers. So you're going to need in these situations to hire more staff. But I think within the public sector, education, health, this should still be a desirable goal, right? We know, we've seen a wave of strikes recently from teachers, junior doctors just announced today. Pay is obviously a hugely significant issue for many of these people, but so is workload and working time. And I think putting back shorter working hours on the table for many of these sectors is going to be just as important as the sort of traditional or office-based work, which many of the companies who've moved earlier to a shorter working week.
One of the most surprising findings in this whole study for me was the fact that revenue went up. Important to say, only slightly. I think it was 1.2% on the previous 3 months. It was significantly more than that on a year earlier. But of course, there was the aftermath of COVID and whatnot. So what you're saying is then that actually implementing a 4-day week, having the same amount of output for the same amount of pay, but people working less, it's going to work in some sectors, but not necessarily in others.
Well, no, not necessarily. I think shorter working hours really has to be a desirable goal across society, right? The effects of overwork, the effects of burnout, we see just as much, if not more, in some of these more difficult sectors, such as the public sector. So it's just as important to find strategies to make that transition over there as well. Look, it's going to require investment. It's going to require a greater degree of thinking and strategic planning to make that happen. But there's just as much need and just as much demand for shorter working hours there too. I think what we're seeing here is an early wave of trendsetters, right, within many of these companies. But this is going to be a growing movement. We've had the 5-day week for nearly a century now. At one point, there was a transition from 6 days for us to win a weekend. I don't think there's any reason we should see this 5 days as set in stone. I think reducing working time is the trend we're set on, is the future we're heading towards. And we should see that across society. It's going to require planning, it's going to require investment, but the benefits are pretty clear.
That was Jack Kellum from Autonomy speaking to me earlier today. Michael, we operate a 4-day week here at Novara Media. Does it work?
Yes. And I do think a 4-day week would be probably one of the big free policies that would just dramatically improve kind of everything. I think it improves people's health, it improves people's happiness. And I think, quite rightly in that interview, suggests there's going to be some industries where it's harder to get the same amount of work done in 4 days, care, for example, because it's hard to increase your productivity because part of the whole point of it is you are physically there. At the same time, I can imagine that even in those sectors, you will do that job better if you're only working 4 days a week, because the job is also to, be someone's company, to check if they're okay. And if you're not completely shattered, then you're going to be able to do that better than you otherwise would. I mean, I suppose how I often think about this is like, we work a 4-day week and it's so brilliant for my life, but also like I'm a single guy with no dependents. Like I don't understand how people work more than I do with like 2 kids. And, it just seems crazy that as a society, we force people to work 40 hours a week and then go home and look after their kids. Like it seems irrational. It seems kind of inhumane, to be honest. So I think moving to a 4-day week is absolutely, absolutely essential. I think what this study shows is that, in some sectors you will be able to do that just in terms of productivity gains, which makes total sense to me. I think in my job, if I was hosting this show, every night a week, it would just get more boring. I'd have less time to think about interesting things to talk about. The audience would hear from fewer people. And then there are going to be some sectors where you do need more staff, and that just means taxing the rich, right? So for a 4-day week, we probably will have to introduce some more wealth taxes so that we can employ more carers, we can employ more teachers, we can employ more nurses. And, it would be great for them. It would also be great for all of us, because wouldn't it be great to go to hospital and not be concerned that the nurse who is seeing to you is completely overworked, completely stressed, potentially has PTSD from COVID and hasn't had the time to recover. I think it would benefit us all if everyone got to walk around society being a little bit happier than they are, and making people work a little bit less than they currently do seems an obvious route to get there.
You said it was one of 3 things that would be quick, simple, easy, but massive fixes for society. What are the other 2?
let's say 4-day week, super cheap housing, and then we're obviously going to have to do something about climate change, aren't we? But I'm not an expert on that one, so I don't have the one neat trick to solve it. But we'll just put that in the climate corner.
Brilliant. Michael Walker just reinvented the left.